right, so hello everyone, my name is Tamash, and today's panel discussion will be about the situation in Ukraine. I'm sure that all of us have heard about it more or less, but before we would start to engage the discussion, we would like to give you a brief insight what is happening in Ukraine. So all of this whole situation started when President Yanukovych didn't sign a trade agreement with the European Union. And after that, people rebelled because they wanted to make closer ties with the European Union instead of Russia. So people moved to the streets, hundreds and thousands were mobilized. And you also aware that the leading party who organized it or who was trying to gather the people was called Maidan. There was, of course, different people who stand up as taking a leadership position. For example, Klitschko, but officially no one was recognized who is leading this whole revolution. The social the situation in Ukraine is especially many ways because in western parts of Ukraine is more diverse. They're living Ukrainians, while in the eastern part and the southern part more living by Russians. So that's why now Russia, when they sent troops, they had sort of casus belli to protect the Russian people, and that's why they mobilized troops into the Crimea to protect the Russians. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, of course. Just hello, I'm Camilla. Sorry. Just a bit of background with regards to social and economical issues that are taking place in Ukraine as we speak. On the 6th of January, the government adopted harsh, as you all know, restrictions on freedom to protest, which later changed, but it had a huge impact and triggered waves and waves of violent unrest. I'm not sure if you've seen pictures of Dmitro Bulatov, an activist who was brutally tortured and a clear case of human rights abuse. Whereas economically, Ukraine is under recession, so it's a really, really sensitive topic. And despite the fact that we're not trying to take sides, we're here with all of you to try and make an informed and objective overview of what the situation is and what cultural diplomacy can do to better the situation, hopefully. With regards to diplomacy, please let me know if I'm talking too much. The international arena has taken a stand, of course. I have some quotes here. Canada has suspended its engagement in preparation for the G8 summit with Russia. Even the Pope has had a big say in this, in support of any initiatives in favor of dialogue and understanding. The Obama administration is under a lot of pressure to fix the situation in Ukraine. So is there space for cultural diplomacy in the Ukrainian situation? Does anybody want to add on to? Does everybody know what cultural diplomacy is? James. Oh, sorry. Who wants to speak? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Yulia. I'm an intern in ICD, for those who don't know me yet, and I'm actually from Ukraine, the only person from Ukraine. I have not been participating in events because now I study here in Germany, but I hear a lot from my friends and from my relatives, and of course, my heart and my thoughts are all the time there, not here. So regarding cultural diplomacy, what Camila says, you ask what can be done. I have to say that there's already have been a lot of things which were done during the revolution, during protests. And I was very glad to find out that people were not just mourning and crying over there at Maidan, but they were very optimistic about their future, about those changes that they can make by themselves. And there were plenty of interesting cultural initiatives that were evolving at Maidan. It all started with a very interesting, nice project which was called Cinema of Civil Protest, Babylon 2013, and it was a union of 40 directors, film directors, who were basically just filming revolution taking place. And it wasn't done in order to market themselves, to brand themselves somehow, but just to give a voice to Ukrainian population and to show the world community what's going on in Ukraine. And you can all find these videos on YouTube, and they are gathering lots of likes and lots of reposts again and again and again. Like, for instance, there was a very interesting video which gathered more than 30,000 likes, I guess, when a woman is just playing piano in city council, which was before occupied and people were fighting there. It was full of blood, and now she's just playing there. And you can see people all around which are just feeding each other. They're giving psychological help to each other. They're just reading there, so things are changing. This is one initiative regarding cinema. There was also a very nice initiative regarding open air university. People had lectures during protests. People were sharing their knowledge, and they were giving knowledge to others. There was a huge library. You could just bring any book you would like to share with others to read. So as you can see, a revolution which has been taking place during those months, it wasn't just a battlefield as it was filmed, as it was shown, but rather it was a place and a ground for people to share opinions, to develop creative, interesting projects, initiatives, and also a boost for Ukrainian energy for being united, and united in cultural terms as well. Thank you. I give the floor to others who know or anything about cultural diplomacy which can be taken now in terms of Russian troops coming to Ukraine.
Thank you. I think it's a really interesting comment because it sounds very much like the protests that took place in Egypt and in Turkey, in Istanbul, where these young people who are part of these revolutionary movements, they really use creative cultural means of expression to convey their political messages. And I think it's really important to have that side of it also, and not just the tough protests that we see in the media. So that's cultural diplomacy very much on the ground in the civil society, I think. What about how cultural diplomacy can be used in this conflict on a more within the public sector, for instance, by governments, by different international institutions, the NATO, the UN, and so on. Any thoughts on that?
This doesn't work. You can use this one.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I'm Brice. I'm from France. It's more a question than something to say, really. I saw some maps showing that basically Ukraine can be divided in kind of two parts, with the Russian-speaking area and the Ukrainian-speaking area. And there's also these issues with gas, which can maybe lead the interest of Russian into this country. So maybe there's some initiative to do about mixing languages, or trying to import the other languages into population, so that these blocks could be divided. I don't know.
Hi, I'm James. I'm an intern at the ICD. I think it's a lot more complex than that. Obviously, maps can show support for even Russia or the West, but Ukrainians who speak Ukrainian and Ukrainians who speak Russian live next to each other. It's very complex. People have to understand how complex the political situation and the social situation is before just saying, half of the country will join Russia and half the country will stay in the EU or stay in Europe. but that's where cultural diplomacy can come in. I think people have to understand each other in Ukraine and understand the political viewpoints before just everyone taking sides.
No, I actually wanted to mention, so it's a very good point that you mentioned the same, because a lot of people talked about that the situation can happen, like with North and South Korea, that people intervene. Although I don't want to go into conspiracy theories, that someone says that who intervened in one section and the other section, but it can be actually very dangerous, because for years and years, these people lived next to each other, well, let's hope in happiness and in peace. And now people quickly started to rebel against each other. This issue can bring families together. So it is actually a really serious situation. But we try to think that if these people would sit down into a table and would discuss it with the help of EU, with Russia, with the United States, hopefully we could avoid more conflict, because so far Russian troops move in and they said it was occupied without a single fire shot. But people predict that this might go further. So actually we would like to know, I mean, your opinion that that's in this case, if you would take a comparison, or if you would take examples from Korea, for example, there are also lots of dialogues who try to make the two countries bringing together, because after, I don't know, 10 years when it was split, they started to trade with each other, so they got closer to each other. But here it seems that, let's hope they won't be split, but what would be your ideas about how to prevent it, or should superpowers intervene, or should they stay out? Russia, United States, Europe should stay out from this conflict and treat it as a domestic conflict.
You want to start? Okay. Well, you made a point which I found interesting, that Russians moved in to protect their citizens. And I'm wondering whether you agree with that, or you just quote what Mr. Putin says. Because I'm wondering, who are you protecting them from? There was no threat from anybody. So this is an interesting excuse. We are here to protect, but to protect against whom? Basically, people now have to be protected against those troops that are already there, because they're being scared. You can imagine people, soldiers just standing all around, and there is conspiracy going. It's obvious, because they are just silently standing and nobody is getting an idea of what's going on. And in the meantime, there are those people who are not silently standing, who are just coming and putting Russian flags and just proving their rights on land which is not theirs. And Ukraine is a sovereign state. Okay, maybe you will say now that I'm talking like a Ukrainian, and I'm not an outsider, not as objective as I should be. But, well, in any case, we need to look at the situation from different perspectives. And you also asked the question whether Russian superpower should intervene. It has already intervened. And I can tell more that this conflict, which now, as you put it, is local, it was all being artificially made, because there has never, ever been any conflict, and it was all just made by media inputs. I am honestly terrified by what I hear from media, especially from Russian media, what they are trying to put into people's heads. And having a look at what CNN says, BBC says, Ukrainian media, and then we have Russian media, and they are basically lying to people, and it's terrible. Like, for instance, telling that thousands of people are now leaving Ukraine and being refugees to Russia, and in the meantime, they are showing pictures and shots of our western border, not of eastern border. Those Russians who, of course, who have not ever been to Ukraine, who have no idea, they might believe it, and they might believe that there are these people who are historically not alive anymore. They are not acting on Ukrainian territory. But as Russian media put it, there are those nationalists, those fascists in Western Ukraine who will just come to Crimea and they will kill everybody, and they will burn your kids, and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering, I'm asking myself, those people who are listening to it, they are educated, adult people. How come do they believe it? How come they can just take things like that without even having a look at, I don't know, at least another media source? How come you can rely only on one media source, right? And what I find also striking that even families are being split because of this. Like, for instance, I have a friend who lives now in Germany. She's Ukrainian, and she has also a family who is now in Canada, and they watch actually only only Russian media. And they do believe in what Russian media says. And she tells them, but would you like to have a look at another source, like this or this, and just compare it all and then make your conclusion? But what we have Russian propaganda. And the point is here that we don't have any counter-propaganda from Ukrainian side. And that's why this conflict is just escalating. It's evolving. And we can see that, for me personally, I can see it as a strategy for make people face each other and have a conflict which is artificial among each other. Yes.
Sorry, I need some assistance here. Is Russia part of EU or not? No. Oh, Russia is not part of EU. Oh, I see. Because I would have asked that why the noise about whether to join Russia or to join EU? If both a Russian and Ukrainian sit together or live together in the same house, why the dichotomy, why the difference? But apparently from the last speaker's submission, it appears it is more artificial. Because I had been following this in the last 3-4 weeks. I know when it broke out during the G7 or G8 summit, and suddenly there was glitch of the former boxing champ on CNN saying, oh, they were going to go on protest. And then I asked myself, that why this dichotomy in opinion for a people we all believe share the same custom, the same culture, and the same lifestyle? I have a cousin who's presently studying medicine in Ukraine, and the impression I got from him is quite different from what the media is showing to the world. And it's from him that I first had that impression that, well, typical Ukrainian and those from the Russian side live side by side. And then it gives me an idea of what we are also going through in Nigeria. Because basically you see that before the advent of this fanaticism, a Muslim and a Christian, and even a traditionalist, sleep in the same room. I grew up with my grandmother, who is a Muslim, but my father is a Christian. But our own parents are traditionalists. And we just enjoy every bit of all festivities available. Whether you are doing the traditional ceremony, oh, certainly will be there. The Muslim festivals will be there. Oh, on Christmas, you will buy me the best of all clothes. And that's the idea of the world I grew up to know. Until recently, I started having ideas about, oh, if you're a Muslim, you don't talk to this person. If you're a Christian, you don't talk to this person. And I just find it strange. So when he gave me that explanation, of course, he is from my mother's side, and his own mother was like my auntie when we were growing up. And I asked him, so who is bringing this dichotomy? He said it is the politicians. And also my mind flashed back to Nigeria too. That's the politicians that are actually creating that dichotomy in order to gain political power. So to me, and I agree with the last speaker, I don't think there is really a crisis here, but rather some people somewhere, and maybe that may be your conspiracy theory, some people somewhere are trying to inflame the situation in order to gain an advantage. Now, what do I think with the involvement of the US and the EU? I would rather prefer the two of them to stay away from it. And I'll give an explanation. I closely followed the Syrian situation too when it broke out. I was outside the country like this. And from the one I'd said that the involvement of those two organizations will actually inflame the situation, because each one will come with some presets of idea on how it should be run or what should happen. And of course, the Syrian people will not be the main focus or the consideration here. And when they were trying to set up this second Geneva talk, I also followed the process, and one of the speakers said that all these people that are forming the Syrian liberation movement or whatever outside cannot actually come to Syria to preach peace. They will be killed. That if truly the EU and the UN want peace in Syria, they should involve the real locals in Syria and not all these people who claim to be in exile. So I think I would rather agree with that with the Ukrainian situation too. It should rather be about the people of Ukraine and not what Russia is beaming to the world or what the West is beaming to the world. Thank you.
My name is Daniela. I'm here for a program certificate. What I would like to say is just somehow to give an answer to the previous speaker that Russia is not part of the European Union, and it will never be, probably because part of its territory is on the Asian continent. So objectively speaking, like Turkey, that is a question if they can be part of the European Union. And also there is no question that the European Union should be out of this crisis situation, because actually, as I have read on some websites, this fight in Ukraine has been the first fight that took place under the European Union's flag. And we know that at the basis, the European Union it has the idea of peace. So the European Union officials drew back when Yanukovych signed with Russia that treaty, but they were there to support Ukraine in any circumstances. So now they cannot just let Ukraine in what's going on there. And I think it's not about Ukraine, but about the independent republic, which is Crimea, and where we can understand that there are two communities, Russians and Ukrainians, and they have been living together there, but apparently culturally they have not accepted each other because they are still strong about their own cultures. So there is a clash between their cultures there, and they are afraid, the Russians for their own community and the Ukrainians for their population. So I think, yes, the US and the EU should intervene. Though right now I think there are lots of indirect threats, economical threats, like business are ongoing, and Russia should pay attention to that. But I think Ukraine should not be left alone in what's going on there. Thank you.
Yep, hello. My name is Mateusz Jasztot Fritzberger, and I am a proto-Ukrainian. My family is was subject to the ethnic cleansing of Poles in Western Ukraine, and I just need to say that before I continue by saying that we have to remember that Ukraine is a very young country, and its population is much more diverse than just the Ukrainian West and Russian-speaking East. And an open question is for me that I have myself both. I'm also like. Have a Tatar descent, and there are still, to my knowledge, Tatars and Rusins and all sorts of different minorities in Ukraine. And when we are asking ourselves how can we apply cultural diplomacy to Ukraine, we have to know who are we addressing. I think that is very important that that we keep in mind the complexity of the situation, the diversity of the people living here, having to find a common ground. And the Secretary General of NATO, Anders Rasmussen, he has stated in the last week that he urged the new government in Kiev to be inclusive. the only thing they heard, some spectators said was that that the NATO acknowledge the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine. But he also stated this, that you have to be inclusive. And from a cultural diplomacy perspective, that is for me the key to this whole situation. To be inclusive of all the different diversity, ethnicities, interests, which are now folding around inside of Ukraine, and we have to have a common ground for this. Also in the new parliament, you cannot deny posts and privileges to the Russian-speaking, as the newly elected government has done. So thank you.
I also would like to add that, in my opinion, this Ukrainian issue is not a minority issue. I think that's just an artificial creation, and I have to agree with Yulia that I think nobody perceived a conflict between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and those two cultures are actually not that different. And we have to remember that Ukraine used to be a Soviet country, and that all former Soviet countries, they have important Russian minorities. So if we talk about protecting the Russians and separating the Russians from the rest of the country, then we should do that in all former 15 Soviet countries, right? Because in Ukraine we have about 17% Russian population, 17. There are countries that have more Russians, percentually speaking, than that. Should we follow that example and just separate all former Soviet countries? There are a lot of Russians in Moldova, in the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, Lithuania, Georgia, Armenia. Let's not talk about Asia. I mean, Kazakhstan and so on, all those countries. I think this is just an excuse, the protection of Russians, the fact that they are discriminated against. It's a geopolitical issue, in my view. And Ukraine, due to its geopolitical position, has been the battle so far, in the last 2 decades probably, between what we call soft power and hard power. We use those terms a lot when we talk about cultural diplomacy. So the soft power, meaning the influences from the Western promise, the European promise, the Ukraine's wish to become European and to become a member one day, and then the hard power coming from Russia, which meaning actually military force, oil, and those resources. So it's been a constant battle, and Ukraine has been oscillating between those two. And maybe when the soft power seemed to gain some land, then we have now what the military threat. And the question is, can we counter that military threat with cultural diplomacy? How can we use cultural diplomacy? I mean, the promise of of a different culture, of a different way of life, of the Western democracy, capitalism, prosperity, and so on, to battle the Russian military in Crimea, which is a Ukrainian territory. And that would be the question to ask.
Just small additions. First of all, when you are saying that Russians are now being protected in Ukraine, but they are not protected in other states, I guess the reason for that is that, for instance, Baltic states, they are members of NATO. That's why Russian citizens cannot be protected there. And in Ukraine is not, unfortunately. But regarding the cultural diplomacy which is taking place now and what can be done now while military threat is taking place, I just watched an interview 2 days ago with Ukrainian, I call him actually cultural ambassador, because he is our famous singer and band leader, Slava Vakarchuk, who is widely known not just in Ukraine but also abroad. He's been promoting Ukrainian culture in Ukrainian songs. He was always singing only in Ukrainian, and nevertheless he was very popular in other countries, and people were learning language just because of these songs. And what he's trying to do now, he is now meeting with students in those regions of Ukraine and those districts where these clashes are taking place. So basically in eastern and southern Ukraine, and he's trying to make people reconcile somehow, to do some conflict resolution using, let's say, his reputation and his image as being a key opinion leader, and people relying on him and believing in him, and apparently trying to bring some peace into those regions where hostility is now taking place. There was also an interesting issue with Slava Vakarchuk and his band, because they were supposed to have a concert in St. Petersburg in Russia. And one of Russian deputies said that now they can't because they're representing a country which is full of Nazis and fascists, and he's singing in Ukrainian, so such people cannot be invited into our country singing here. But in any case, as Slava claims, the concert will take place, and he's also made a kind of announcement to his Russian fans. There are plenty of people who enjoy his music in Russia, and he just gave them his YouTube video of singing in Russian language. He started to talk now, because he was also always talking, mostly he was talking at least when performing during concerts only in Ukrainian, but now he switches Ukrainian and Russian, trying to show that we are united, and we are trying to reconcile, and we are trying to decrease those conflict points which were just made artificially, as you said. Thank you.
Just another short intervention. A case that I'm very familiar with is the Moldova case, and if we remember the Vilnius summit, it was about Ukraine and Moldova. And what's interesting about Moldova, because it's also a former Soviet country, it has a big Russian minority, and because of its special relationship with Romania, because there are many Romanians, the majority of the population is Romanian, and they are considered sister countries, so to say. It was very easy for Moldavians to get Romanian citizenship. And after Romania became a EU member, all of a sudden, all those having Romanian citizenship were also EU members, EU citizens. And they were able to work in countries like Italy and Spain and Portugal. They were able to travel. They had all those advantages that you can feel that can improve your day-to-day life. And the interesting thing was that now Russian ethnics from Moldova, they apply for Romanian citizenship. They do not speak Romanian, but they want to be able to travel to Europe, to work in Europe, because it's a better life. And I think that's an important, it's an interesting way how this, how Moldova actually signed the treaty. There were no problems. They have decided to go west, so to speak, and even though there is a big Russian minority, and those Russians, when they had to choose between, they chose the European, dream, if you want to call it that way. So I'm wondering if something similar could happen to Ukraine, if Ukrainians would understand what are the advantages, what they could benefit from going west, if that would change their mind, would help, the population unite on that issue.
What I would be interested in is there, you think, a part to play for the EU and US and UN in this conflict, or would it be like they posed it that they should leave themselves out of this conflict and leave like Ukraine to itself? Or do you think they have a part to play in this, and what would that part be then? Like, what can they do to help Ukraine? And from your perspective.
I wish I could say that we can cope with everything and being independently, but as you can see, there is already another state on Ukrainian territory trying to force events and to escalate conflict, which wasn't existent. So apparently, I believe that we do need support of international community, and I can see this support at least from words, at least from what I see. because now the whole world, all diplomats are discussing Ukrainian situation, both in EU and in US. They are trying to make things clearer and more transparent, apparently, with Russian side as well. But so far, as I can see, diplomatic dialogue doesn't really work. And this is something that is very disappointing and frustrating for me, because we are here to discuss diplomacy as a powerful tool, as something that can help to prevent any conflicts. But apparently, there is a conflict which is going to take place, which is already taking place over there, and diplomacy is just helpless and hopeless. This is something that is terrifying and totally not understandable for me. But whether I can see that we need this help, yes, I think we need help. We need help, and I wish that diplomatic help and poor dialogue could be a resolution.
Well, listening these interventions and also some inputs in the media, I mean newspapers and television, internet, etc. Now talking how we can fix this problem, no, with maybe with cultural diplomacy. One of the first thing I realize, especially sometimes listening, the people, the media, and all this stuff, is that I realize that we have a problem. Because it's like, sometimes it's like when you are trying to buy a house, it's like to try to start from the roof. And usually you have to start from the basis. And I mean, here is a problem, of course, in Ukraine, in Russia, and in some other countries in the world. You were talking about Nigeria, I heard, in Africa, in all the places now. For example, I came from Barcelona, now it's starting another problem with Spain and Catalonia. And the problem is, this is the basis, because maybe the problem is not in the origin, also only cultural. Everybody knows there is always, when the people is fighting each other, is for, the basis is we have to discover and ask why. And the reason is, of course, money, but why they are fighting? They are not fighting for the Russian flag. They are not fighting from the Ukraine flag. In Spain, the people is not fighting for the Spanish flag or the Catalonian flag. Because you can hear the people, yeah, we want independence because we feel Catalans. But when you're asking, it's why, because yeah, our PhD, the product economy is better, and maybe we can be better without Spain. But the point is, like, they don't know that is the role of the politicians, because this is education. Everything is propaganda when you are growing in your schools, in the media, your parents, religion, nationalities. It's like I told the last time, if you don't believe in God, no problem. There is also the feeling of nationality. If you don't believe in nationality, no problem. There is maybe football, you have to support any team. But it's because always we need to believe in something. And this is the main problem, because the point is, like, the sad point is, like, in Ukraine or Russia and everywhere, some people maybe, I hope no, maybe some people are going to die. And do you know what it makes me sad? It's like some powerful people, because maybe it's money. I don't know if it's the gas of Gazprom, the energy, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really know what is in Ukraine. I know there is some, some kind of industrial of minerals there in some points. Maybe it could be interesting for Gazprom. It's very interesting. I was talking with that this morning. It's very interesting to realize, for example, it could be stupid, but how is playing now Gazprom in Champions League? Is one of the main sponsors in Champions League. Now it's starting to sponsor another teams. Schalke, Shakhtar Donetsk from Ukraine is going to be one of the main sponsors of Bayern Munich. Is going to introduce his economy in the Premier League. And you have to realize, okay, maybe this is only one thing, football, but you can, expand that interest in everywhere. And imagine a competition, for example. Now I am talking about a competition, but after it could be about nationalities. Now it's about the competition. Imagine if the competition, you are the main sponsor and you're sponsoring your teams. You can do almost whatever you want. It happened the same with the countries. You are expanding interest. You know, it's kind of invasion of culture thanks to the money. That's all. And yeah, recovering what I was talking about, the thing it makes me sad is like, maybe some people are gonna die, maybe not there in some places. And yeah, the politicians, maybe they are not believing in anything. They are gonna have good women, they are gonna have good food. You are laughing, but that's true. They are gonna have good life. And the people, they are selling the message why they have to fight, they are gonna die. But the sad point is when in the funeral they are gonna say, don't worry, your son, you know, your wife, your husband is dead for the fruit of the nation, for the fruit of God. So we are talking about culture, but economy and whatever. The problem is not to fight against the problem here. It's here. We need free minds. That's all. No, not only diplomacy. We need diplomacy, of course, because diplomacy is dialogue, as I told the last time. We need to fight against the biases, clean all the ancient kind of knowledge we had, because it's manipulating the people. It could be religions, nationalities, wherever. It doesn't matter you are French, you are Spanish, you are Portuguese. You want the same. You are breathing, it's like I told the same time, you are breathing the same air. You are sharing the same field, the same planet. You are drinking the same water. And you are gonna have children. It's like your neighbor. The only thing you want is have a normal life, a dignity, and your children can grow up with happiness and opportunities in the future, with respect with everybody. So it's the basis. The problem is the basis, in my opinion.
Thank you, Esteban. It's a good note to end on. Yeah, I think we are coming to an end because we have another lecture now, right? I don't know if you want to introduce it fastly.
I think we're going to have a short reception downstairs, and we can all take something to drink. And then at 5:30, there will be a lecture by Professor Uli Bruckner from Stanford University about the German foreign policy. So if you can all be back here at 5:30, that will be perfect. And for the rest, thank you very much for your comments and your attention. And let's all have a drink together.